Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Dudi Peles, and I'm one of the founders and the chairman of an NGO called Games for Peace, and I'm here to tell you our story. I just move myself here, and we'll start. Our story begins on July 2013 when I got a call from someone I didn't know then, a guy called Uri Mishol. He was an high-tech entrepreneur, an Israeli high-tech entrepreneur, and he had a crazy idea. He didn't know video games. That's why he called me. I was considered kind of a video game expert at that time, but he did know that kids love them and thought he can use video games to bring kids together. Specifically, Jewish and Arab kids. Both Uri and me live in Israel, and in Israel, kids, Arab kids and Jewish kids don't interact much. They learn in separate educational systems, and you almost don't interact with, if you're an Arab, with a Jew, and if you're a Jew, with an Arab. We had an idea that an experience that a child has in the virtual world can exist, can have an effect in the real world. And I like the idea. So other people that we presented the idea to them also liked it. And we decided to try and use popular multiplayer video games to promote a dialogue and fight racism among kids in Israel. And that's, with this idea, Games for Peace was founded. We founded an NGO and started investigating this idea together. The first game we chose is a game called Minecraft. I don't know if all of you know it, but today it's the most popular game in the world, and most kids like it. And what's good about this game, is that it's kind of like a Lego that everybody can work together and build together. So the core of it is cooperation and team working. Minecraft is also being used in a lot of other educational environments. So it was a great fit for what we were looking. When we just started, our first idea was to send a call to all the Middle East gamers to play together. We organized events, we called them Play for Peace weekends, and called for everybody from the Middle East to come and play with us. And we had very interesting events with people from Israel, of course, but from every other place in the Middle East, Iran, Jordan, Lebanon, everybody played together, and it was kind of normal in some way. Everybody, our kids, everybody are playing together, and it was a great experience. But as we continued with these weekends, we understood that we're basically convincing the convinced. That means that if you enter the game, you already want to make peace. It's not, you don't suffer from the problems that we saw in the Israeli society. So we decided the best way to make this dream come true for us is to build a school program. We built a school program called Play to Talk and started convincing principals, both in Arab schools and in Jewish schools in Israel, to participate in it.
Thanks to the project Play to Talk, Arab and Jewish school children, who are separated into different educational systems in Israel, can change their perceptions of one another. The focus is on reducing prejudices through positive interaction, since negative stereotypic beliefs about the other are still omnipresent. Play to Talk uses a platform that children immediately feel comfortable with, that of the popular video game Minecraft. In the project, children from a pair of Jewish and Arab schools meet on a weekly basis to play Minecraft together from their school's computer rooms. Rather than having one school play against the other, the children are divided into two teams, each mixed between the two schools. The children are presented with a set of challenges that require increasing levels of cooperation and collaboration. To overcome the language barrier, Minecraft's chat system is equipped with an automatic online translation service. Throughout the program, the virtual world is supplemented by face-to-face meetings, where the children discover the real people behind the avatars. The virtual and real-life experiences have a lasting effect. Pupils not only overcome stereotypes, many of them also add their counterparts to their social media circles and stay in touch. So there is a persistent change in attitudes towards the other group among children who completed the project. A remarkable achievement that can promote intercultural dialogue and understanding.
On April 2014, after one successful pilot, we were asked to present what we're doing in Build Peace Convention 2014. It was our first time in a convention like this, and it was great because one of the attendees liked the idea so much that he contacted us and asked us to come to Georgia and try to operate our program the same way we did in Israel in the Caucasus. In November, we flew there and shared in details what we do, and Games for Peace Caucasus was born. We continue to operate the program in Israel, aiming to make Play to Talk financially sustainable. Both Uri, me, and all the other entrepreneurs all came from the high tech, and we didn't want our NGO to be dependent on donations. So we started charging schools and municipalities in order to turn this program into something sustainable financially. In 2017, we conducted a research showing significant, long-lasting positive change in students participating in it. That means that a student that played in the Play to Talk program were more positive to the other side and was more willing to interact with the other side. And that was great. It's not only based on our feeling that it's successful, we have a research saying that it does that as well. At the end of that year, we've been awarded the prestige Intercultural Innovation Award by the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations. It was a great honor, and to see that not only people inside Israel acknowledge what we do, and it was a great honor. In our first 5 years, we've reached 1,500 students in 50 schools. At the end of 2019, we had a technical challenge, and we were forced to completely reboot our program. We had to upgrade to a version of Minecraft that's called Minecraft Education. Otherwise, the Ministry of Education didn't allow us to continue to do our program in Israel. So we launched our pilot at the beginning of 2020, and this is how Play to Talk looks today. Our first pilot in our new program was halted because of COVID-19 lockdown. Students in Israel stopped going to schools. And of course, they won't allow face-to-face meetings. That was the missing part in the pilot currently. So in order to continue our program, we developed a distance learning version of Play to Talk. We call it Play to Talk Home Edition. And we finished the pilot, and it was super successful. We also launched an esport training program for mixed team, also suitable for distance learning. That these two ways were our way to deal with the COVID-19 crisis. Just last year, we were approached by the UN Technology Innovation Labs in order to duplicate what we're doing in Israel, in Kosovo. We still haven't stopped working with them, but hopefully this will also roll out soon. The main reason we're here is to let you know that our approach works and can be duplicated, and we'll be happy to help anyone who wants to duplicate what we did in Israel and what we're doing in Israel. For more information about us, you can go to our website. For the first time in 5 years now, it's updated, as we just updated a few months ago. And you can, of course, reach out by email. I'll be happy to assist anyone who wants more information about what we're doing or want to try and duplicate what we're doing in other places. Thank you very much for your time.
Hi, welcome to my home office kitchen and welcome to my talk, Make Games Not War. I'm Johanna Janiszewski. I'm a game developer for more than 12 years, and in 2016 I founded the indie game studio Tiny Crocodile Studios in Berlin, Germany. At Tiny Crocodile Studios we make family-friendly games, entertainment, and we also teach how to make games to kids, teens and young adults. I personally have already a bit of history with making peace-related games. I co-organized the local Peace Game Jam here in Berlin in 2018 and in 2020. Why should we even care about games? You might ask if you're not a gamer yourself or you're not from the game industry. And yeah, well, games are a cultural good like any other media. And right now they are the most popular media, especially with the younger generations. In games you can discover immersive stories, but not in a linear way like in movies or books. You can choose your own path, you can play with the options, you can play with the outcomes, and playing always equals learning. And with the right game, you can play and learn a peaceful message. Okay, games are nice and fine, but why making them? Why not just playing them, discover them? Well, making games gives you the unique possibility to change your perspective from a consumer to a producer, to really learn what it takes to make a game, to dig into the content that you want to communicate to your players. It's also really inexpensive if you do it as a hobby. As a professional work, it's actually pretty expensive. But if you do it as a hobby, there's lots of free materials, free tools that you can use, and the only thing you have to invest is your time. Also, it's a lot of fun. Playing games is fun, making games is a lot of fun too. It also gives you the unique possibility to represent yourself, to tell the world your story, to let them feel how it's to be you. And it's a really great possibility to empower yourself, to empower your peers, to tell their stories to the world, and with that create more understanding amongst people. Well, but how? How are you making a game? I created a little recipe for you with which you can create any kind of game that you can come up with. So when you start making a game, you first need some kind of development platform. Or if you want to make an analog game, some crafting materials. You might already have some ideas that you work into a design, and most games also have a story, so you need to work on that. Then you might also need some art, like background characters and items. You might want to have music and sound, but actually those are optional. You can make games without them. Of course they're prettier with, but if you want to start out first, you can, they are optional. You don't have to have them. Of course your game has some game rules and some game logic that you need to write down or maybe code. Not every game has to be coded. Depends on the tool, or maybe if you're making an analog game, then of course no coding required. And once you're done with your game, you're happy with it, you might want to distribute it somewhere. But this is also optional. Maybe you made the game just for yourself or your family. So yeah, you can, but you don't have to distribute the game. And now you might think that you start from the very first point and go through every point until you're done with the game and ready for distribution. But it's not that easy. Actually, games are made in so-called iterations. So after you decided what kind of game you want to make and with which platform, you work on the ideas, you create your artwork, music, blah blah blah, write your code, and then you test it and you noticed, oh no, the game does not work. It's full of bugs, the player doesn't understand how to play, art looks ugly, whatever. And maybe you think, I will never make a game because I'm not good enough. But actually that's perfectly normal. No game is perfect right after the first steps. That's why we're doing them in iterations. And once we went through all the steps one time and tested and see what works and what doesn't work, we repeat those steps over and over and over until the game is done. So we polish, we fix the bugs, maybe also work on the ideas again, work on the story again, until we are happy and until we are ready to distribute the game. And when you think of making games, you might maybe also Google it, you might come across those professional game engines, which are Unity, the Unreal Engine and the CryEngine. Many indie studios who don't have their own game engine work with those. But as a beginner, I would recommend actually to start a bit smaller because these tools, these engines, they are very complex to learn. So if you just want to focus on making a game, you maybe want to start smaller. For example, with crafting materials. You can make a board game or a card game, no coding required. Or if you want to have a digital game in the end, you can start out with a paper prototype and work on the idea first before you learn how to use one of the professional tools. You also don't have to invent a brand new game every time. There are games like Minecraft, for example, that allow and actually encourage to create custom content in it. And you don't have to just use digital games for that, also analog games. You can take a game like this card game Werewolf over here and you can invent new playing cards for those. So don't have to invent everything from scratch every time. You can just mod something. If you want to go digital and want to create something new, there are lots of cool visual scripting tools and beginner tools. And actually they are so easy to use that I personally use them in my professional work as well for making prototypes because they are so easy to use. It's so less pain than working in the professional tools. And yeah, you don't have to run a marathon. Go baby steps, learn something new on the way, and eventually you will get there. And I have my top 3 beginner tools with me, which are Twine. With Twine you can write interactive fiction. You can, but you don't have to add art and music. So if you're more of a writer and not an artist or coder, I can highly recommend using Twine to go all in with your amazing story that you have in your head. Bitsy is also for interactive stories, but in Bitsy you can also draw some cute little pixel characters and pixel animals, whatever you want to have in your game. And Scratch over here is something that I use very often with my kids. It's a toolbox with visual coding, so you can build whatever you want, but you don't have to type out the code. You can connect puzzle blocks. And it comes with a lot of cool and easy to understand tutorials. It's designed for beginners, so if you want to learn about how to code, I can highly recommend Scratch. Yeah, at some point in this life we will be able to go out again, to go outside, meet our friends. And maybe you want to start develop a game for when the time finally comes. Live role-playing or role-playing games in general, they give a unique possibility to discover yourself, to discover the perspective of others. No coding required. Again, you play with other people directly or on a table. And also here you don't have to come up with your own world or rules. There are rules that you can build up on and that you can create your custom content for. And there's so much tools that I pasted here 2 links that give you the possibility to explore even more tools. Don't be overwhelmed. Start with the top 3 tools, discover them, and then take a look at the others. At the end, I have some helpful tips for you that help you actually make your game and not only dream about it. And that is, start small. Even if you have a big game idea in your head, start with something very, very small, because this is already more complex than you think and will take more time than you think to make. And hang in there, because at some point it will get frustrating. It gets frustrating every time. So even after 12 years, we still have those frustrating times. But it's perfectly normal. You go on, you make your game, and at some point you're over this frustration, and then the game is finished and is good, and it was worth it. Keep it simple, similar to start small. Don't make your game too complex, and if you think it's simple, then it's probably still too complex. So test it with your players, see if they understand everything. And follow lots of tutorials, because before you can make something in an engine or in a tool, you need to know how to use the tool. So before you go in with your really cool and big game idea, start with something different and learn how to use the tool first. And that's it. Thank you for being here. I hope I could inspire you to make your own games. And with that, I wish you good luck and lots of fun. Bye!
Hello everyone, my name is Qamar Jafri. I am PhD candidate in RMIT University, Australia. My PhD research explores the youth peacebuilding initiatives in Pakistan. So, in my PhD research, one of the research questions that I examined was drivers of radicalization of young people in context of their different identities, that is religious identity, sectarian identity, and ethnic identities. My research findings tell that there are the different education systems and different learnings in young people lead to their polarization based on their identities. For example, those students who study in madrasas or religious schools or religious seminaries, they learn exclusively religious teachings, Islamic teachings. They do not learn about the modern education systems, humanities, arts, social sciences, computers, and other communications studies. When they graduate from the madrasa system or madrasa education, they have very limited skills, they have limited knowledge, they have limited opportunities for employment in the constitutional system of Pakistan. For example, they cannot become doctors, they cannot become engineers, they cannot become political leaders, they cannot become lawyers. So these become the barriers for them to adjust in society and to get employment. And of course, without employment, without money, no one can survive. Everyone needs it. On the other side, private education and public education system impart the students science, social sciences, English, communications, arts, the physical sciences. They develop knowledge that is relevant to their to market, to the employment opportunities, to the jobs. uh, they they are at advantage. They can become doctors, they can become engineers, they can become politicians, lawyers, and in media, in academia. They have vast opportunities within the society. They can compete. They have knowledge, skills relevant to the market, job market, business market, and even international competitions. On the other side, the madrasa students, madrasa graduates have limited opportunities. They only become they can become imams at mosque. They can become madrasa teachers. They can become Islamic studies or religious studies teachers at school level, at madrasa level. So this system becomes barrier for them to adjust in the system. When system becomes barrier for them, they look to the system as an enemy for them, and of course it is, because this is their right. This is their fundamental right to become part of the system, to get engaged in the system. When they have this kind of attitude, this kind of religious attitude, mindset, uh, they interact with the politics. When they interact with the politics, the religious leaders, right wing leaders, they they give them hopes, they give them promises of system that will be suitable for them. For example, Islamic system or caliphate. uh, they are attracted towards that identity based politics, and the leaders, political religious leaders, exploit, manipulate their already learned different identities, attitudes into religious identity and religious politics. So they start right wing politics. Right wing, the madrasa graduates become the part of right wing politics, and of course they are polarized in against to the public and private education system. On the other side, the public education system and the graduates of private education systems, they dislike the right wing madrasa graduates, right wing ideologies. They develop the hostile attitudes, and the social distance and the interaction between the young people of madrasa and uh, madrasa graduates and the private and public education system. Social interaction becomes difficult for them to maintain, because the madrasa graduates will categorize the graduates of modern education system or private and public education system as the worldly knowledge that is not useful, that is mainly from the western knowledge, and that is anti-islam, that is the anti values of muslims, anti-islamic society of pakistan. This kind of attitude develop the polarization, prejudice, discrimination in relationships and attitudes and in behaviors towards each other. On the other side, the graduates of modern education system look at the religious students, graduates of religious schools, and the leaders of religious political parties with the dislikeness. they dislike, because as madrasa students, the religious leaders, they relatively they have mm, they do not have critical modern knowledge based logical reasoning, critical thinking, and their analytical abilities mainly become the mockery of the graduates of modern education system. That mockery, that stereotypes, that negative competition of identities polarize the young people. That there are some joins to right wing, the other one go to the left wing politics. So identity based politics develops in Pakistan. That identity becomes sectarian politics, then religious identity politics, and then ethnic identity politics. In this way, different identities are manipulated by the political leaders, by the vested interests, and that polarization in Pakistan give more identities, in group identities, and social relations and ethnic relations become problematic. So that problem originates from the education system. In light of my thesis, I will suggest inclusive education system. That is, if religious students can learn the modern education, critical knowledge, social sciences, and they can easily adjust, and they can have less problem with the other young people in the society. So inclusive education policy and inclusive educational curricula teachings can can less polarize the young people, and they can easily adjust in their social relations in the society. So I will be happy to give answers to your questions after this my talk. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you.
El programa Cooking Up a Conversation with Sol Colombia.
Rodando.
Hello and welcome to Cooking Up a Conversation with Sol Colombia, with your host, me, Sanjay. And today is our first episode called UN 75 plus Sol, how to cook a large-scale nationwide conversation to create the future that we want. Welcome. So hi, we are Sol Colombia, and our purpose is to design the future of learning in Colombia. Our passion is to connect education, technology, and rural Colombia. And as you might know, well, in this country, decades of armed conflict and violence have silenced people for a long time. People are scared of speaking. Probably we've never known well how to have a conversation, because it's always been a big issue. And since 2014, we, the team of Sol Colombia, have begun an initiative to break that silence. It's called SOL. SOL stands for Self-Organized Learning Environments. And basically it's part of a global movement to use technology to empower groups to learn, collaborate, and most importantly of all, to solve real-life problems together. In that sense, this year, the UN is turning 75, and the Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, suggested to the world to come together to shape our future in a worldwide dialogue to think about what kind of a future we want to create. And here in Colombia, the UN approached us, Sol Colombia, to join them in creating this large-scale conversation, nationwide conversation, with three big purposes. One, to connect people, hopefully people, to gather voices of those people who are less heard. Second, to amplify their voices using different kinds of channels. And third, to inspire mobilization, to inspire action in people. So that is what we're here to tell you a little bit about today. So what are we cooking? As in all good cooking TV shows, we're going to show you first the result of what a large-scale nationwide conversation looks like, to talk about the future that we want to create. Basically, we've had over 1,500 people participating from all corners of the country, diverse voices of kids, teens, adults, elderly people, women, men, indigenous communities, Afro-descendants, teachers, librarians. We've had a wide range of voices, diverse range of voices coming together to talk about the future that they want. And in that sense, we've had kids talking in Puerto Alejandría, Quimbaya, talking to us about how they are concerned about taking care of the river, which is their subsistence in their town. Or we've had people like Angelica from Bogotá talking about the importance of teaching about love. Or Israel Medrano from Cartagena talking about us as the people who have to create the peace, and the way we have to create peace is precisely listening. And I think this is what this whole conversation has been about. We've had also people like Alirio Gonzalez, who talks about the importance of learning to what we had learned from what our grandparents already knew, which was the idea of not having to live with such level of comfort, and probably that has to do with taking care of our environment. Or Maria Isabel Murillo, who also talks to us about racial discrimination in this country and how we have to use education to eradicate those kind of racial discriminations. We also have Maria Sun, who talks to us about how we can create trust and sort of get rid of this fear that is right now up to date in our conversation with both violence and pandemia. And I think what's very beautiful is, for example, this last quote by Fabian, saying what you can't build through dialogue, well, it doesn't build absolutely anything at all, which is basically saying the only way we can really create this future that we want is through dialogue. So we have done waves of conversation throughout the 2020, starting since last May, and these are the faces of the people who have been participating in our conversation, giving us their voices so we can amplify them, take them off to the UN. So next step, let's get into cooking a great conversation. So what are our ingredients for a great conversation? Well, the first ingredient is you need around 20 people for a conversation, hopefully very diverse types of people, ranging in ages and interests from different parts of the country. That's the first part that you're gonna need. We're talking about, we had conversations of around 20 people. Why 20? Because 20 is a good amount for everybody to get a voice out, but also it's a good way of having a very rich conversation. Less people is not a bad thing, but if you can get 20, it's pretty good. So what do? You call them up and you invite them to a conversation. The next thing you need is a big question. That's very important. A big question can motivate an awesome conversation. People will talk about what's important to them, but if you have a good question, that's going to be clear. The next thing you need is a good method for conversation, and that's where we have SOUL, self-organized learning environments, where basically people will come together to answer a big question without the need of a teacher. The next thing you need is a space for deep conversation, and as pandemia didn't allow us to come together in presence, well, we're using the virtual world to do so, and for that we have two tools, one for video conferencing, which is called Start SOUL, and another one for asynchronic conversation, which is called Lumio. Basically, both platforms allow us to engage with people with difficult levels of connectivity from different parts of the country. It's been beautiful during this pandemic because we've been able to talk to tons of people. Lastly, what you need, a computer with a little bit of internet per person. And I think most importantly, what you need is a bit of guts and a lot of fun so you can take it forward. So, let's go into the method of conversation. What does that look like? So, basically, we had waves of conversation. We're going now to our fifth wave of conversation. A wave of conversation takes around 6 weeks. The first part, we train people, we prepare them to have conversations. So what we're doing is we're inviting our SOUL ambassadors all over the country for them to make their own conversations. They invite 20 people from their community, and they create a big question with which they want to have a conversation. So they take those 20 people, they put in their big question, and they do a remote SOUL. A remote SOUL has 4 simple steps: saying hello, presenting the big question, letting go and letting people go and answer the big questions, and then coming back together to harvest all the answers which are there and allowing people to have an open conversation. After that, the ambassador takes notes of what happened, writes down a conclusion, and we put it on our Lumio platform for people to vote if they agree or not with what was taken as notes, inviting people to be actively participant of making their voice heard. Finally, we register those results and send them off to the UN so that that's heard, but more importantly, we take those results and give them back to the community and say, hey, these are all the conversations that are happening in posts like this in social media with our maps or our infographics, or inviting people to different open spaces of conversation like radio shows or other video conferences to do these kind of things. Inviting people to analyze what happened in each wave of conversation and hopefully inviting them to continue talking. Finally, the last part of this wonderful conversation has to do with how you serve and share. And today, this is what we're doing with you. We're sharing to you how we had this conversation and hopefully inviting many more people to do this. Because imagine what would happen to a country like Colombia and what would happen to the world if we all spoke about all those interesting and difficult topics which are in our mind right now. Thanks so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed the show. And what is your big question to start a wonderful conversation? Start it today.